want to welcome you again to our show, Diaspora Live Show. In this show, we discuss everything that affects the Kenyans, the Kenyan diaspora abroad, but also from time to time we go back to Kenya and discuss the topical issues that are going on. Today, we want to focus on the role of the diaspora in Kenya's development. More specifically, we want to talk about how the diaspora can get involved in the decision-making back at home. The only way you make decisions is when you take part in the politics of the country. There are those ones who think that the diaspora have no business in getting involved in the politics of the country because they live away. But we have a majority of Kenyans living away from home who argue that as long as our voice is not represented in the political making bodies back at home, especially parliament, at the counties, and even at the president's office, the role of the diaspora will always be ignored. From time to time, the government will pay lip service to the role of the diaspora, but the diaspora are tired of being taxed without representation. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. And the topic today is how the diaspora can get involved in the politics of the country. Straight away, I want to introduce Nathan Wangussi, our regular panelist on this show, to make the case for why it's important for the diaspora to get involved in the political making process back at home. Daktari, it's my pleasure to welcome you again. Please make the case for the diaspora to get involved in what's happening back at home.
Thanks, Chris, for having me on the show as usual, and to my esteemed panelists. So as you said, for far too long, the diaspora has been given lip service on one of the fundamental rights they have as Kenyan citizens, which is the right to vote. And this is in the backdrop of a population of nearly, under the last estimates, about 3 million Kenyans. And let me just point out, compared to any other county, the diaspora are second only to Nairobi. So it's quite a large number of people who have been, who have made the choice or because of economic circumstances chosen to go and live and work in other countries. But that does not equate to follow the argument that some people have made, that you made the choice, therefore you don't deserve to be represented. And this is also in the backdrop of other nationalities. So we have examples of Indian Kenyans, Malawian Kenyans coming and getting representation and voting. Yet we Kenyans who, as you said, make a very large constituent, but also a very big dent on the economy, don't have that representation. Now, I also want to say up front, I think it's also the responsibility of the diaspora to self-represent, in the sense that they need to have a legitimate political organization that will represent their issues effectively. So if today the government wanted a political voice to speak on behalf of those, of these 3 million people who live in the diaspora, the truth is that there's just a wide diversity of associations and groupings. In fact, some tribal in different parts of the world that represent the diaspora voice. But what we really don't have, other than this sort of self-help or representative associations, we don't really have a strong or a unified political voice. Now, if you look at any other, if you look at any other constituent, you have to give yourself an organization, or you have to create an organization that represents your own issues. So as we speak, there's no political party registered in Kenya that specifically represents the diaspora as a constituent. And I think that's the first thing that needs to happen. The loose formation of associations that there are right now represent the welfare issues of the diaspora, but we don't really have a political voice. And I think that's primarily why government doesn't have any imperative because there's no one organization, one in political association, political party that can represent our interests. So I think it's really key that now the diaspora needs to take that bold step and legitimize as a political grouping.
Awesome. So, thanks, Wangussi. David, I'm talking about David Ogega from Atlanta. I know these are things that you've been working on. Wangussi suggests that we need some kind of, political vehicle that to advocate for the diaspora issues. But I would like you to make the case for why also we need the diaspora, because I know you've studied the trends in terms of diaspora remittances. So Kenyans especially are going to ask you guys, what is it that you've done for Kenya to demand for political representation? Can you make that case?
Oh, yes. And once again, Chris, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm loving this every time we do it. So thank you. So, I'm going to echo a lot of what Dr. Wangussi just said, which a lot of it is, when you think of it, it's actually common sense that the truth of the matter is, us as a community, as the diaspora, we do remit, 300 billion shillings to the country, and more than what it used to be from tourism, now agriculture. Actually, at this point, it's all combined. When you combine those two relative to what we remit, it's actually a lot of money. We overtaken all that. And we do help support that economy, because when you do, that's the actual funds that go to the country in the form of remittances. But then there's what economists would tell you are considered the multiplier effect. In other words, that money circulates in the economy. It might circulate maybe 3 or 4 times within 1 year. So if you take $1 and recirculate it about 3 or 4 times, that dollar really, it's been multiplied by 5 times. So take 300 billion, multiplied by 3 or 4, that's 1.2 to 1.5 trillion shillings impact in the economy. That's a lot of money coming from one constituency, which is the diaspora, the 48 county as we're called. But again, it's something that you said at the introduction, which is taxation without representation. That's not sustainable. What we've tried to do, and what we're still trying to do, is get our seat at the table where these decisions are being made. Because if you look at the history, or if you do a comparison between the Kenyan diaspora and other diasporas, as Dr. Wangussi said, whether it's the Israelis, the Ethiopians, the Indians, the Nigerians, these people, somehow they've kind of figured out a way to work collaboratively with their home government.
I'll come back to you,
Sure.
But you've mentioned something that is very important. And the good thing is that we have a history professor on this show, Professor Monda, who studied these things. And what I'd like Professor Monda to talk about is really what you said, the trends around the world in terms of what kind of countries that have a very influential diaspora in the world, the diaspora that has made a difference in their countries. Professor, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I definitely piggyback on what Nathan and and David have mentioned, and thinking about this whole diaspora question, Chris, from the perspective that you mentioned about contributions of the diaspora, we need to remember the history of the diaspora, of the Kenyan diaspora and the African diaspora more broadly. So, for example, during the Kenyatta and Moi eras, opponents of the government were forced out of the country, and citizenship was weaponized. In other words, the government would cancel individuals' passports, restrict their access to the country, and citizenship or dual citizenship was one of the weapons, for example, in Kenya, used to keep critics of the government like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, like the late Kaptama Mkangi, a whole range of activists to keep them abroad. So this had really over the years created a big hostility between diaspora and individuals back in Kenya. And we see this also in other parts of Africa. For example, in Cameroon, in Ethiopia, till today, you lose your Cameroonian and Ethiopian citizenship, immediately you gain foreign citizenship. So that history on the continent is there. The issue in Kenya was with the 2010 constitution, we brought in this new dispensation, where in 2011, we allowed for dual citizenship. And I think that was a groundbreaker. Almost 10 years later now, we've reached a point where the diaspora is saying, we are not asking for voting rights, we are demanding these rights. In other words, there seems to be this conflation that just because diasporans send money home, therefore they are relevant. We are relevant to Kenya whether or not we send money home because we were all born in Kenya. That's our birthright. And I think this is really the point from which Kenyans are agitating. We love the country, we love the continent, we have a lot of skills to contribute. And I think by virtue of our natural rights, no president, no government can strip a Kenyan's citizenship away from them. It's in our constitution now. And what we want to move forward, going forward now from 2020 to future spaces, future years, is to think about how do we politicize our voice so that we can get a seat at the table and actually be influential in the public policy making process. And I think this is now where we're starting to think about organizations or vehicles through which we'll be able to agitate for the diaspora. One of the suggestions have been we create civil societies towards that and agitate for that, and then either all political parties.
Awesome, awesome. Prof, we'll come to that.
Okay.
I want to bring in Dr. Makobe, because Makobe is one of the Kenyans in the diaspora who has argued that talking about remittances, that's not an enough or an adequate reason for us to demand for political involvement. I know that because I've spoken to him about that for quite some time. So I want to invite him to explain what he means by that. Dr. Makobe.
Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you, the panelists also. I like it when we discuss these issues. My point about participation of the diaspora in Kenya or in Africa per se is that we are talking about power. And when we're talking about power, we cannot depend on the benevolence of the people who have the power to create space for us. And since we have distance, long distance relationships never work. So what I think, and what I think that what will make the people, the government in Nairobi listen to the diaspora in the US, in UK, in Germany, is if they know that the diaspora has leverage locally. You succeed locally, then influence the foreign policy of the country, your old country. If you do that, they will listen. But there is no incentive whatsoever for President Uhuru or even future President Ruto or any person in power in Nairobi, even one of us, if they go back to Kenya and become president, they have no incentive whatsoever to create space for the diaspora just because they were born there or just because they are sending their money. Because the government knows that you have no leverage to stop the money going there. You can make noise as much as you can, but the money will come. So what I think that the diaspora needs to do is to organize itself locally, make sure that they have influence in the countries where they have gone to settle, and then be the people to who those people in Nairobi or in Cameroon come to when they are dealing with the country where they are. That is what that happened with the Israelis, it happened with the Indians, it happens with all the diasporas. You cannot beg your brother at home to take care of your land because you know very well he will receive your money if you are giving the money, but when you start talking about the land he owns, he will take you to court. It happens in the families and it will happen in the country. So my view is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is what is called insanity. And the diaspora have been talking about, we want to be allowed to vote. We are sending you a lot of money. Please make sure we have a place at the table. These guys are not going to give, they have no incentive. So your incentive is get involved locally. Make sure that you have access to the Senate Foreign Committee. Make sure that when the foreign office in Nairobi or the ambassador in Nairobi is talking to the American foreign office, they are talking to you or directly. In that case, they will be listening to you.
Thanks, Dr. Makobe. Osiro.
Yes.
Let me bring in LA in the house. Osiro, like David says, power is never given. Power is taken. Have we been doing the wrong thing all these years as the diaspora?
Again, Chris, thank you very much for the opportunity, and the panelists. You know, it's an honor to spend another Saturday with quite an esteemed group. I think we've been doing the wrong thing, and I think if you look at like Dr. Mondo said, the history of the diaspora vis-a-vis Kenya, vis-a-vis African countries, the local governments have weaponized the citizenship and the right to return or the right of movement back and forth to the point of really almost neutralizing whatever capabilities the diasporas could have had in the local countries, in the home countries. The way I look at it is, I look at two countries that Dr. Makobe already mentioned, Israel and India. They have organized themselves locally within the diaspora. So specifically, when you talk in California, in my community, we have a very, very well-developed, highly organized Indian community that is now, with the elections going on, you can see them getting involved in the local political process in the adopted home of America. Now, so that allows them to basically harness themselves, to organize themselves as a social, political, and economic force. And then you see that whether it's in California, whether it's in Texas, in Austin, whether it's in New York, when the Prime Minister of India travels to the United States, he makes a point of stopping at each of these centers that have huge Indian populations. So like in San Jose, California, when I think it's Modi, when Modi was here, the Indian community in San Jose basically had about 50,000 Indians from all over the country there to welcome him. And that was not only a show of numerical force, but it was also a show of the economic force that they wield. And so with that show of force, India recognizes that, and now all of a sudden the government of Modi puts the diaspora, the foreign department, the foreign ministry of India has a section that is specific to the diaspora, and they work hand in glove with the different Indian communities throughout the country. The same thing with Israel. Israel is very, very involved with the diaspora, especially in Silicon Valley, because of technology and because of Israel, because of Israel's need to be self-sufficient and to have cutting-edge technology to defend itself. They are very, very involved with the Israeli community in Silicon Valley, and that flow of know-how, that relationship allows them, the diaspora, the Israeli diaspora, to basically harness them, form themselves into a viable, not only social force, but now political and economic force that compels the Israeli government to recognize their input, and actually not only recognize, but reach out to them every time they want to, they have an initiative in which they can tap into the expertise of the diaspora. So I think the Kenyan government has been doing it wrong by failing to recognize really what we in the diaspora have. And, I think we see that how many years, so 50, 60 years later, we're still having the same conversation about the diaspora having a seat at the table.
Thanks, Washington. Nathan.
Yeah.
Why do you believe Osiro's and Dr. Makobe's assertion that the diaspora play tokenism or increase their voice in the diaspora flawed? Why do you think the diaspora need to have a place at the table where decisions are made, especially in Kenya, in the political forums?
Yeah, so when we're talking about having a seat on the table, I think we just need to be very clear about what that means. So it means, one, having a representation in parliament, in the Senate, and having a local, as we constitute or as we identify as the 48th county, having a representative at that level. So we're not talking about government acknowledging that the diaspora exists. Government of Kenya has acknowledged diaspora exists for many, many years. There's a diaspora policy in place. They've put systems in place to receive our remittances. They even tax us. I think Makobe made that point that we are taxed at the normal 16% for any money that we send. But as David was saying, nobody hands power willingly. It's something that you have to either negotiate or you have to, unfortunately, in some cases, it has to be taken, or at least we have to motivate for why that is important. And I think the way we do that, what has been done wrong is that there are welfare associations. So the Kenya Diaspora Association, there's a recent splinter group called the Kenya Diaspora Association of the United States. And then there's a wide range of associations in the different countries and in the different regions that represent the welfare issues of the associations. What we still don't have is a political voice. And a political voice means a political party. There's nothing that stops the diaspora today from registering a political party with the Registrar of Political Parties. We have 3 million strong constituents. Those are the number of Kenyans living in the diaspora. And that group of people need representation.
Thanks, Nathan. When I get conflicted on some of these things, I look to the historian and the professor. Professor Monda, why are we still having this conversation? If you're talking about the money, we have the money, we send the money back at home. If you're talking about the intellect, we have the intellect. 2020, why are we still talking about this? And when you're answering that, put in mind the fact that we can't even vote in spite of the fact that it's in the constitution that was made in 2010.
Yeah, I think a couple of things here. I think it's very important for us to understand context. So it's really not fair for us to compare the Kenyan diaspora with the Israeli diaspora or the Armenian diaspora. These are two very different contexts. The issue with the Armenians is they fled. It was an existentialist issue with the genocide. They were being killed in millions. With the Israelis, we know about the Holocaust. So with the Kenyan diaspora, it's a little bit of a different context, right? So there's political persecution, but people came to the US. We all came here for so many different reasons. Some people came on green card, some people came to school, some people were being persecuted. But I guess the gap with the uniqueness of the Kenyan diaspora context is this idea of how do we incentivize people to actually get involved and want to form this organization that will speak for everybody. I have a little bit of a divergent view from Nathan in the fact that I would be a little uncomfortable registering one party in Kenya for all diasporans. We have so many different ideas.
I'm not even suggesting that.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Has to be those political organizations.
Let me make my point.
Yeah.
I think where we should be thinking is thinking about, can we have a civil society movement in Kenya that would, through which we can vet candidates who can speak on our issues. Now, if that candidate is conservative, liberal, from the western part, from the eastern part, we're very diverse. And I think it would be, the elites in Kenya would play diaspora against diaspora if for example, we as a group of 5 of us registered a party, because they just get 5 other people to register another party in Kenya to speak on diaspora, and it would just be very, very confusing. I think the other element of the Kenyan diaspora, which is very challenging, Chris, is we've not taken care of our own constituency here. Mm-hmm. There's about 40 to 50% of the Kenyans here who don't have papers. Now, we really need to take, they say courtesy begins at home. So we really need to start thinking about how can we incentivize some of these Kenyans who are living in the shadows, who are living under the table, working under the table, to access their papers so they can actually get the citizenship and they can actually get involved in our movement. I think it's a 2-pronged process. We need to really have a very serious discussion about the millions, thousands and thousands of Kenyans who are living in this country, up to 40% of us who have no papers. And then think about another context back home about how do we create a movement in Kenya, whether it's a range of political parties or whether it's a social movement grouping that can really speak to ideas about transforming the Kenyan political scene.
Awesome. So I'm actually coming to you, David.
Okay.
You've been working on these things. How hard is it for Kenyans in the diaspora to unite and to coalesce around an idea and form some form of some force as a group, as a constituency?
Chris, and a great question, because I think that's our biggest challenge, to be honest with you, that as a community, we're extremely fragmented. And it just so happens that our government notices that and they exploit it to the hilt. They would tell it to you to your face that go unite and come back, right? And they have a point. I mean, that is the truth. So what we've tried to do, as you know, Chris, and for everybody's information, I lead an organization called the Association of Kenyan Diaspora Organizations, something that we came up with to try to, advance our welfare and try to unite Kenyans so we can have what I call a common platform. It's been a tough process, because of how widespread our diaspora is, even in the United States, people all over the country. But we're making progress.
Nathan, I've run out of time, but like I say, this is just the first part. So I think now the emerging issues, the question still remains, and I go back to where we began. How are the diaspora going to influence decisions that are made in Kenya? And the question I want us to discuss next week is, do we form a political party away from home, or do we support an existing party in Kenya that has our interests, a place where we can use as a vehicle to influence the decisions? Or do we continue to be splintered along tribal, ethnic lines, and of course, economic lines as it is? Guys, think about this. That is going to be our discussion next week. I know, Nathan, we've not answered your, we've not even touched what your concerns, but I've run out of time. Thank you, guys. Let's pick it up next week.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.